feel like the beard makes me look like I'm always about to go skiing. I don't know why. I think it's just because like having stuff on my face was always something that I did when I would go skiing.
Yeah.
But for whatever, like every time I see myself, I'm like, whoa, you look bundled up.
And we're live.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. We're live today with Nicholas's skiing beard. I'm Adrianne Gunn.
I'm Nicholas Rave. Welcome to the Enlightened Couch Potato podcast. Oh, I was talking over you. I'm sorry.
Oh, it happens. What are we? Part 4. We're in part 4 of the movies and TV that made us. And we're hovering in this fun zone. We're in the fun zone. Is the fun zone better than the friend zone? Whose voice am I doing?
I don't know. Just go with it.
I think they took my stapler.
Are we in the friend zone? Is it? If you take my stapler, I'm gonna burn down the building. Is that the voice?
A little bit that one. Earlier, I was singing Rubber Ducky in my car because that is on my SD card that has music in my car. Marveling at how many voices I can sometimes do, which is pretty great. I got distracted. So we're in that fun space of awakening, which I think I was looking over the notes that I prepared because I'm prepared today. And I noticed that a lot of crossover. And then when I talked to Nicholas, apparently we both have crossover because there's some pre-awakening movies and TV shows we watched, and then we rewatched them after awakening. What do we mean
I
when
would
we
say
awakening?
Well, I think we defined it last week when we said the definition was intentionality, like being conscious, simply being conscious of the power that stories have.
Right.
That once you realize the possibility that this could be a transformational experience, they all sort of open up to being a transformational experience.
Absolutely. And reflecting again, since some people might be joining us for the first time, our whole premise is that you can watch movies and TV and utilize the power of their evocative, emotive ness to help you shift things internally. Right now we're in the process of demonstrating and modeling what it looks like to talk about what TV and movies mean to you and the themes that have shown up. That is part of the process, being able to have conversations with people and thinking about what you're seeing and what you're viewing is one of the steps in the process of having more intentionality and allowing these tools to help you shift the way that your life feels.
Specifically, the step that we're in right now is what we call the stories or movies and TV that made you or made us. So it's the idea of going back and looking at the most significant movies and TV shows of your life, particularly your childhood, because we made the point a few episodes ago that these stories, the movies that we watch, are in a very real sense, they are more our history and our legacy and our culture than our actual culture or our family history is for many of us.
Yeah.
They're certainly better told stories.
Yes. And the other thing is that as we progress further in our adventure, we will teach you how to drop in more fully and allow. Nicholas likes to use the metaphor about psychedelics, the metaphor of how psychedelics are a useful process. I don't indulge in metaphoric or other forms of psychedelics. These are my psychedelics. These are the pictures, as well as my own meditations. These are the pictures that I allow in my head to help shape my perspectives so that I can see my own world differently. I actually have a story that I won't, maybe I'll tell later, but probably not today, about how Black Panther to me was much like taking a psychedelic. Like going in and seeing that movie and then coming down from that and going out into the regular world is much like friends of mine who take psychedelics have described it. So we will tell you in more depth how to increase the value and to drop in deeper into a deeper trance, or allowing TV and movies to be more effective for you. Right now, we're doing the more conscious process of I don't know, we're modeling a journaling process or a conversational process. You could literally talk to your friends about what these shows in your life have meant to you.
Yeah. The thing that I think about a lot in terms of the psychedelic metaphor is another way to say that is trance, hypnosis, right? So one of the most profound lessons that I have gleaned in my 15 years, I think, of practicing hypnosis professionally is that trance, the state that you go into in the hypnotic process, is valuable in and of itself. In other words, you don't actually need any content at all. Just going into that state where you surrender and relax the judgmental, critical, worrying, rational part of your brain, you shut that thing off, take a vacation for a little bit, and then go into the surrendered openness that is the trance state. That is beneficial by itself. And movies are quite possibly the most powerful hypnotic tool that humanity has ever created.
Yes.
So that benefit that you get of just going into it, there's one caveat, the one asterisk, and this is something I keep repeating in every episode, is you can sabotage that benefit very simply. And it's the way that I think most people sabotage the biggest benefit that you get from watching movies and TV. And that is if you're judging yourself while you're doing it. If there's any part of yourself, your unconscious mind, that is sitting there thinking, I shouldn't be doing this, I should be doing something else, this is not a good use of my time, oh, I'm being lazy, or I'm wasting my time sitting here watching movies when I should be doing something else. And by the way, maybe you should. Maybe you should be doing something else right now.
Yeah.
But my point is, if you never have that experience, if you're always running that pattern, whenever you sit down, you are robbing yourself of the potential psychedelic transformative benefit of stories.
Yeah. I want to be clear that he said that if you're judging your watching, you're out of the ability to have it be meaningful for you. I think there's a lot of power. So we talk about we'll talk about surrendering and how to do that and how to get into that state where you're allowing things. I think that there's wisdom too in the things that you're not allowing. I think we were joking with me that I was hate watching this show last week. I think there's a lot of power in paying attention to your resistance and the things that you're judgmental about and the things that you're shouting at your TV. I think you can have breakthroughs even if you're not specifically enjoying what's going on. And one of the shows when we ask each other, like, what'd you watch? One of the shows I watched, I think that was one of the powerful things that happened for me. It was getting a new sense of both the trance and the resistance and the grumpiness, and as it was coming out of my face, and having a part of myself watching and witnessing the things that I was being grumpy at or judgmental about. That is part of how these things can be empowering. I'm just putting that out. So having a judgy voice and resistance showing up while you're watching things doesn't necessarily mean that you're not getting value from what you're watching. So Nicholas, what are you watching?
Well, I'm still going through Altered Carbon season 2. We made it a couple more episodes through, enjoying it very much. I don't have a lot of comments on it because I'm kind of waiting to see where the story goes. But it's still fun to watch. There was one part in it that I thought, for those of you who don't know the storyline at all, that it takes place in the future where humanity has gained the ability to like download your entire personality and memories and everything into like a little like USB disc. Sure. And then you can slip it into different bodies. So you can go and like you can swap bodies. And effectively, you can become immortal this way. You live forever. And there was one part in the show when they did this like facial recognition thing where they were like pulling up memories of people from his unconscious, and then they were able to identify them based on their face. And I was like, what does facial recognition mean in a world where everybody can jump into different bodies? Like, what is that? That felt like a little.
Yeah, essentially, I think it must mean whatever the person thinks their face looks like.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
At that point in time, emotionally,
It's
like
all
how
subjective.
they've stored the memories.
Yeah.
Which essentially means that none of these people actually look the way that we think that they look.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what anybody looks at that point.
So I don't suppose I'm going to spoil any of Altered Carbon with what we've said. I had this curiosity after finishing season 2. Not that I appreciate nakedness. What I'm curious about in any show that has future bodies, would they not be in some robe? Would storage facilities of clones really be that naked? And also I have a curiosity about future sexuality too, because this is a huge theme in this particular show, and other futuristic things become more sort of porn and prostitution infested. Like most of the future realized, what is it? Is it Fifth Element, and what's the one with Arnold Schwarzenegger and
Total Recall?
Many of these futurized spaces. I just, as much as you're about to talk about Picard not being the utopia that was whatever show he was in before. I don't remember which Star Trek he was because it's not in my lineage. So I think it'd be really interesting if we could imagine, if we're going to imagine other universes and planets and worlds, couldn't there be a world where if a woman's alone, she's not likely to be raped? Isn't it possible that there would be a space or planet where women and men are treated completely? Are we not creative enough to imagine?
There's a couple episodes of Star Trek that address the exact issue that you're talking about.
That's a little ridiculous. And I don't mind how naked things are in these shows, but they're a very specific kind of naked that only presupposes that we will continue to not only be awful, but get worse. And that kind of bothers me.
You mean awful specifically, like worse around sex and sexuality?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But
and
is
violence.
So you think that's present like in the culture, but not with the heroes necessarily? You seem like you're thinking of something specific, and I'm not. Maybe I haven't got that far.
In all of those examples, I mean, this is even from Altered Carbon season 1. In all of these examples, there's a very violent sexuality that gets exacerbated, and maybe that's a point that they're making in like Fifth Element and these different examples. I don't know. I'm just thinking about it back here that we don't necessarily become more evolved in these future guesses.
Well, the stories are being written by people now.
Oh no, I realize it's just not very creative.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious. I think like it seems like if that was the story, that would have to be the entire story. If that's an element of the story, somebody would write the entire futuristic thing about like, look, we figured this out. Yeah.
No, see, but that is my point from last week about bad writing, where you have to preach about what you did to fix the thing rather than just show up treating people differently and having the world exist differently.
Have you ever seen Demolition Man?
With the shells.
Yeah. Okay. So the shells were something that they don't explain at all. But then they also have the sex scene. You remember that?
Yes.
Where, like, the exchange of bodily fluids has been outlawed. So sex becomes this thing where you put on like a visor or like a head thing and like connect in your brain.
That is one example
Yeah.
that I have seen of it different. I think the show, the 100, is also very different too, without specifically saying, hey, we solved this.
I never watched, what's the Wachowski TV show?
Sense8. Oh, I didn't write that down.
I haven't gotten around to that yet, but I know that I need to because everything the Wachowskis do.
I mean, that's a way different topic
Jupiter Rising.
that I'm bringing up that I'll talk about later. Did you what was the other show you were watching? Did you?
I'm hate watching Picard, but I really don't need to say anything about it. It's terrible. I hate it.
Yeah.
And then the other one, this short comment on it. I've been like comfort food watching Simpsons episodes because we got we switched to Verizon and got like a year free of of Disney Plus.
Oh.
So I've been watching all the Simpsons episodes are on there, and the season 3 through 8 are like considered the classic seasons where it's actually like genius and amazing. And one of the things that's been really surprising is how much my 10-year-old is into it. That he he often does not watch the shows that we're watching. Like we have stuff that we watch together. Like we did a Marvel movie marathon leading up to the last one's Endgame and the one after that. No, that was it. Infinity War and Endgame.
Yeah.
We watched all the Marvel movies, and then that way Pierce and I had seen most of them more than once, and then Liz could watch some of the ones that she'd missed and watch all of them leading up to that. And so we do like family movie time and family TV shows. But normally if we're watching something like Altered Carbon, he's not interested, and he'll just go hang out and do his own thing. But when I turned on Simpsons, he watched like 6 episodes in a row with me. And there's a couple of takeaways that I have from it. Number one is it's hard to wrap your head around how revolutionary this was at the time. That the jokes now are so tame that they're hard. Some of the things that would have been like, oh, I can't believe they just did that on television in a cartoon. Cartoons are for children. And like now you don't even register. Like there's moments where there's like a pause for a laugh after a joke. And you're like, why is it pausing? Oh, that was supposed to be a joke. Oh, like it's really hard to remind yourself how cutting edge. I mean, the Simpsons was the Rick and Morty of its time, and it's certainly not that now. But it's still good. Like a lot of the jokes, like certainly hold up, and then the other thing that's been really fun is it's really a smart show. There's a lot of jokes I didn't get when I was younger. I wasn't allowed to watch The Simpsons when I was a kid, but when I was in my late teens, early 20s, and I was like, oh, The Simpsons is important. And so I started watching it then. There was a lot of stuff that even then I didn't get or understand, having been extremely sheltered, which might be a nice segue into one of my movies if you want. But explaining the jokes to my 10-year-old has been really, really fun. That there'll be a joke, I'll laugh, and he'll be like, I don't get it. What's funny about that? And I'll pause it and I'll explain it, and he'll be like, oh, I get it.
That's awesome.
And that's actually really fun. And I feel like it's like so many comedians or people who develop a good sense of humor can point to the comedy that influenced them. Like, where did you learn what a joke was? Where did you learn how to set that up? And like Monty Python, for example, is like everyone who worked on The Simpsons grew up on Monty Python, right?
Right. Yeah.
And same with South Park. Like South Park grew up on The Simpsons, and to a certain extent. So, Simpsons has been fun, and it holds up, and it's very much just like put it on in the background.
Nice.
Yeah.
Ask me what am I?
Oh, what are you watching? Sorry.
Okay, so I'm not even sure why I said yes to this. I think I saw several people posting Love is Blind on Facebook, and so it was in my head, and then there it was in my feed. And the premise of this show, it's a Netflix experiment hosted by Nick Lacey, and I'm just going to say his wife because I don't know her name, because he was a singer of some group. And maybe, was he with Jessica Simpson? I don't know.
When you say experiment, is that how they're billing it, or are you calling it an experiment?
Yes, they're calling it an experiment. So Love is Blind is this experiment of having, so it's filmed, it's shot in Atlanta, and I didn't quite get that until like 6-7 episodes in. So they took a group of men and women and they set them up in this building where there were pods in the center. The men and women were separated. I think there were 20-ish. And what they do is they go on like blind dates. There's these pods are set up. They're rooms where they communicate, and there's a wall between them. And so they go on dates to find out if they can fall in love with who someone is on the inside
without having seen them.
Without having seen them. That would be interesting enough, but raised up from that, the bar is raised higher that they will have the opportunity. They have 10 days to go on all these dates with these people and then propose marriage. If they fall in love with someone, propose marriage
before you see them.
Before you see them. And then they get to
love the premise.
Each other. Yeah. And then they get to see each other and are whisked away on a romantic vacation so that they can find out if their emotional connection is also a physical connection, that's amazing. And then they have 4 weeks to plan their wedding, to integrate their lives, to meet their families, to plan their wedding. And at the end of the 4 weeks, they either say that they do or they don't. That is the premise of this show. And so when I was saying earlier that part of the process is also paying attention to the times that you find yourself yelling at the screen, I think it's really interesting. On one level, there's this familiarity that I have, having watched a ton of romantic comedies. All of the Efron sisters movies with Meg Ryan, the Sleepless in Seattle and those kinds of movies of the 90s when rom-coms were a thing and popular. I don't think rom-coms are maybe coming back, but they're not as important to culture right now as they were in the 90s. We repeatedly see people fall in love. All of the little constraints that happen before they fall in love or they admit that they're in love, and then the movie stops. That's most of the movies. They never get to the part after they've found each other and said yes to this love and this connection to actually build a relationship. So most of us are programmed, when we talk about the movies and TV shows that we're made of, we're programmed for this like tension before the yes. Mm-hmm. And then it all ends. And then
it says happily ever after. And then you're just like, that's what we all expect relationships to be.
Yeah. Well, and even television shows do the will they, won't they, will they, won't they. And at the end of it,
they say seasons.
Yes to their love, but you don't necessarily see them together. I guess Bones maybe has them together, but I stopped watching after that.
Right.
But only because
I wonder why the shows do that.
But it wasn't because they were together. It was because there was a lot of seasons, and it's that crime. I just got a little tired of women being murdered and kidnapped over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, a little formulaic.
The buddy cop show of women being murdered. Yay! Let's keep perpetuating that. So this show is interesting because it takes us beyond that. And then we get to see a lot of people's insecurities. We get to see a lot of people's ability to communicate or not, and how that plays out, whether people are willing to reveal themselves openly and tell the truth. What happens when real life shows up and they start closing down their hearts when they had opened, how people shift, what other people's opinions do to a relationship, the sanctity of that, what I've heard is called couple bubble. It's very fascinating. And what I think is also very interesting is theoretically the premise is that every single one of these men and women are humans who want to get married and believe something about marriage enough to show up to do this thing and want to fall in love in a particular way. And I guess the spoiler is that every single one of the people that they put in this experiment are TV attractive. So the odds that people would be like disappointed, they didn't put that into the mix.
Right.
Which is, I guess, interesting and cool.
Right.
But yeah, I kept having a lot of my own, really, I found myself being really challenged around what we've decided marriage equals. The whole, like, I want to do some research to be like, where did the bachelorette and bachelor parties come out? And all this asking permit, like this structure of this is like, all of the people that I know that are married have a very different marriage from other people. And I find it very strange that we've theoretically agreed upon what marriage is. And so I've just been paying attention to my own, like, what? And I think that they also specifically found people who are not only willing to be married and think that they know what that means and think that that's an agreement they're all agreeing to. And then two, these are people who do want children. Like at no point did that become a challenge for any of the people in their conversations, which I also thought was fascinating. Anyway,
like
but
not a single person. I mean, maybe they did pre-interviews with people. I mean, obviously they probably did.
I think
so
they
they probably
pick
picked
these people.
Certain degree of compatibility, which that's kind of interesting. There's already like an assumption of matchmaking going on that just to get in the group, they're going to be like, well, we're not going to pick anybody who's like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example that isn't going to be offensive.
Right. Well, somebody who
they didn't pick any
sure
white supremacists. How about that?
Potentially not. Right. Well, and that's the premise of figuring out whether money, background, those sorts of things will get in the way of their hope was that people that they found people who were open. I mean, essentially, the people who would show up for something like that are open to the idea that love is blind, and they want to find that, and they have their own personal reasons for wanting to not be judged primarily on their looks. And I just find it fascinating. I could not stop watching it.
Just to be clear, this was not a movie. This is like a reality TV show.
Yeah, I think there are 10 episodes, and then they do a follow-up, and they're all like about an hour long.
Can I let my geek flag fly for a second?
Sure.
So as soon as you started describing the premise, I thought of a twist. And the twist, do you know what the Turing Test is?
I've heard it.
So the Turing Test is something that Alan Turing came up with, and it's the premise that if you were in a room and you were being you were communicating with text via text, so you couldn't hear a voice and you couldn't see a face, but you were communicating via text with an artificial intelligence. Passing the Turing test is an artificial intelligence that would be able to convince most people that it was a real person.
Oh my gosh.
So that's what I thought is the premise of this show. But then at some point, the twist is there's no person there. It's just an artificial intelligence.
Season 2.
Season 2 of Love is Blind Ex Machina.
Oh my god. Yeah, so that's what I was watching. I don't suppose I have a lot of insights. I did get to experience my ideas around. It was really interesting and wonderful to see open-hearted men, because again, from this space of watching a lot of rom-coms from the 90s, I think I was 23 when I was doing a binge watching session, and I recognized, wait a second, nearly everything I watch has men going out of their way for the love of a woman. I wonder if men actually like women. Wait, or also, is it possible that they're capable of actually falling in love? Because much of the things that I watched are full of unavailable men with closed hearts, and it's not so different. That seems to be the trope of manhood. But it was weird that the trope of manhood is this unavailableness, and then their hearts crack open just a smidge, and then suddenly they're in a relationship and married, and so to even just like turn that on its head, and you wonder in my own life if men are actually capable of love, and what are these stories that I have? Like, men don't actually like women or want families. Breaking that open somewhere around 23, and then watching this show where they actually do have vulnerable and open men, which is sexy as fuck, by the way, and still not very representative of what we get to watch on TV. And there's a show, Travelers, which is also Canadian produced, which I've brought up before. There are several very sort of evolved male characters on that show who have open hearts and show up differently in the world than what we're used to seeing. And so that was one of the things that I felt was a powerful thing to get to witness, is getting to see real men in that state of openness and love, and then watch and notice when they would close their energy down and be protective and the switch is very fascinating. That's what I was watching. The
that belief that you became aware of, the programming around, like, wait a minute, like, are all men just unavailable? Is that just the way that it is?
Apparently the trope.
The programming goes both ways. Like, men get the programming that's how you're supposed to be. And then women get the programming, expect this from men. But one of the messages, like, I picked up growing up, very conservative, religious, as well as media and movies and TV, was that women felt that way about sex. That no women actually want to have sex, that sex is a transaction that women tolerate, and it's a thing that they hold on to and they'll give to you, and to finally, like, feel the scales fall from my eyes, to use a biblical metaphor, and like to see the code of the Matrix and to finally realize, wait a minute, women want sex too? What? Like,
yeah. And they won't, you don't have to like cajole them and like tear asunder the sex
trick
them.
Or manipulate or, use game or whatever.
Yeah. So strange, the programming. So that's, I mean, the reveal of the romantic comedy thing, that's part of some of my programming pre-awakening. So I watched a lot of that stuff.
Well, just wait for Liz to join Enlightened Couch Potato, because she has so much material she wants to talk about on that subject that I've seriously considered that she might need to have her own channel just for that stuff that can be like associated with Enlightened Couch Potato. But she's going to be excited to talk about all that.
Yeah, we have hidden teammates that will in the digitals as we create them, the website and our Facebook group, which we will decide how to do. So what were your...
Do we want to keep going with, what were your movies that made us?
Yeah.
It's pre-awakening, post-awakening?
Maybe it's threading through.
Okay, well, let me talk about one. So lately I've been, because we started the podcast, so I've been thinking about this stuff a lot more. And as I'm sort of compiling the actual step-by-step process of how to do this, because the podcast is really us just kind of shooting the shit and figuring this out. Yeah. But eventually, like, this is probably going to end up being a book that we write together, or like a training course, or even like a coaching program where we can teach people how to coach other people through this, to use movies and TV as a transformational tool. So as I've been thinking about all that stuff, I've noticed that I've been expanding my ideas. Like, I thought I had it figured out.
Sure.
And I thought I had a pretty narrow band of like, okay, here's how you do it. And now I'm starting to realize, it's actually much broader than that. There are different strategies to suck the value out of different types of movies. And my strategy tends to be very much about the types of things that I'm attracted to.
Sure.
So this next movie I'm going to mention is one that I got a very different kind of healing from than the typical movies. And I mentioned being, what did I say? I said there's a transition that I can make here. It was something about sheltered, I think is the word that I used.
Yeah.
Okay. So did we talk about the movie Blast from the Past yet?
Yes, you did. You said that was
did?
the closest to your.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then I'll mark that one as. So Blast from the Past is a movie with Brendan Fraser where he basically spends 30 years living in a bomb shelter in a bunker underneath his house and then comes out and is like introduced to the world. But he's sort of 30 years behind culture and the times. And it's a kind of silly, lovely movie. I still like it in a lot of ways. Some kind of cliche tropes and whatnot, but still pretty funny and enjoyable. And definitely good spirited in a lot of ways. Like he comes out and he's a very sweet person, and that kind of wins the world over to him. And that movie resonated with me very much because I was like, oh, I am like that. Like I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere, homeschooled, running around in Christmas trees in my barefoot. Barefoot? I only have one.
Just the barefoot. The other one had
okay, so that was the first one. One thing that I notice as I go through the list is there's probably the single most consistent theme in movies that have a significant impact for me, pre-waking up or post, is that they are largely about waking up.
Oh.
They are stories that are asking questions about consciousness, about free will, about philosophy. So an example, one of my favorite movies, pre-waking up, post-waking up, is The Truman Show.
Oh, yeah.
With Jim Carrey. Now, we should do a whole episode just talking about the depth of Jim Carrey's movies, because he has serious movies. But what's really interesting is even if you look at his comedies like Liar Liar or Bruce Almighty or Yes Man, these are movies that are funny, but there's a depth there. There's a moral to this story that is very profound. And you get the sense, especially now with the sort of Jim Carrey that's emerged more recently in the last few years, you get the sense that that's very much on purpose, that he is trying to pick movies post like The Mask and Ace Ventura. Like after that, he was like, I want to do movies that are actually going to impact the world. Like he's intentionally trying to positively brainwash people with the stuff that he makes.
And there's his director, whose name I don't recall, who did a documentary that I think is still on Netflix. I don't know if it's called Waking Up, and I don't know if it's called The Gentleman Who Had All of That. So he does a bunch of these Liar Liar and those early movies with Jim Carrey, and then goes on a spiritual quest to try to figure out his own migraines and other things that were his health challenges going on.
I don't know about this.
So the director of a lot of Jim Carrey's movies is also someone who was spiritually minded and on a spiritual path.
Huh.
So you might enjoy his.
I should check that out. There's another documentary about Jim Carrey that's about how he the process of making the movie Man on the Moon, where he played Andy Kaufman. Charlie Kaufman's the writer. Yeah. Andy Kaufman, the comedian, where Jim Carrey was basically in character for the entire time that he was playing that. And he kind of went nuts and then sort of came out the other side being not remembering who Jim Carrey was. Yeah. And it's pretty fascinating. I know we've talked about this before.
So behind the scenes, Nicholas and I have had lots of conversations about Jim Carrey. In front of these scenes, I will let you know that it'll be interesting to have me on that episode about Jim Carrey, because I think that the method acting is non-consensual, non-acting. And I think Jim Carrey is often praised when he is in triggered states. And I I can appreciate that he is a gentleman who's had trauma and he's healing and he's on a path and he has intentions to be a good force in the world. And as a person who's traumatized, I think he's often quite narcissistic and one of those people who is overly celebrated in our culture, having not completely healed himself. And there are a lot of these humans. And so it'll be interesting. I'm willing to have the conversation. And I think that my non-polite way is that I don't necessarily think that we all should be sucking at the cock of Jim Carrey as much as we do. And I realize that there are steps towards enlightenment, and he is on the path. And many people who are also hurt and hurting people will find him and then move forward along their path. And so that's great. That's good too. I'm a little done as a female-bodied person with celebrating people who are problematic. I find him problematic, and I am willing to participate in a conversation where we talk about the philosophies he's taken and opening our minds, because God knows I have a lifetime of learning from people who teach things that they're not following themselves and knowing how to dismantle that and use it in my own life. So that's the
I forgot how much Jim Carrey triggered you before I brought this up. I totally forgot.
We can't necessarily. I think the common threads between Jim Carrey and Robin Williams, and the fact that the both of them are not so dissimilar, and one of them did not make it, is
I don't see them as similar at all, really. Not that I'm saying Robin Williams didn't have his trauma, obviously, and his progress, his own journey through that, and also a commitment to telling stories that have some kind of weight to them and make a difference in the world. But I see Jim Carrey as being different, and I don't know, like maybe that's my own personal way of seeing it. He also doesn't trigger me the way that he does you. So like I see that he goes through the world in a way that can be very confrontational for people.
Yes.
But I like that. Like I like that. And I think your non-consent point hits home. Like I definitely think that there is a conversation to be had there. So anyway, Truman Show is a story about a guy who is realizing that the world is an illusion. And that premise is rampant through a lot of Eastern mythology and even Hindu, like the idea that the world is this thing called Maya, which is an illusion. It is the Matrix, and it's not real. And it's all something we're making up. And when we have these stories that are a metaphor where it's literally the world is an illusion, and you're watching him come to the realization, and then spoilers, that moment at the end of the movie when he fights through the storm and the voice of God and all this stuff, and then that black door that he has to walk through into the unknown that was a transcendent moment for me. And I'll grant you, I don't think it was the first time I watched it. I think it was maybe the second or even third time I watched the movie, when I had woken up enough myself to get what was going on there. I do love that movie. That movie, Spotless Mind, and the one with Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman, I think, is just contracted now forevermore to be God. Yeah. What is that? Is that Evan Almighty? Bruce Almighty. Bruce Almighty. Evan Almighty is a sequel. Yeah, but it was just Steve Carell as Noah. Okay. Didn't have the magic of the first one for me. Sure. Did you have some movies you want to share? No, I got lots more, but yeah, I was thinking pre-waking up. I was thinking of the themes and moments that were powerful for me in my waking. So
I mentioned 6 Feet Under as being, I think last week I just mentioned 6 Feet Under as a show that shifted how television shows work. I think 6 Feet Under, 24, and Lost really changed the way that TV. 6 Feet Under proved that you could be quirky and weird and have an entire concept. Alan Ball was signed to 5 years. He knew that he had the 5 years to create that show, so he told a whole arc that he had intended. I know Lost did not know that how long they were going to go, and we talked about how they didn't create an arc, but they also did weird TV where in the past people didn't know. They didn't always show their episodes in sequence, because they had like 4 episodes where they had to move TV shows around in weird ways.
Oh, it's so stupid when the network does that. Yeah.
Well, but that's what had existed before 24 and Lost created a platform that required you to watch,
you have
having
to see
watched
it.
the first episode. And they never repeated things. That's why they had to put the thing at the beginning of last episode, because you would just drop in the middle of a show and they would be sort of rehashing things in the formula. Things like Buffy and Xena and X-Files, they were all pre-serialized TV in the sense that they had maybe 4 episodes that could be dropped in out of order. And they also often used to have that like episode that would be a compilation of previous episodes.
Clip shows.
Yay.
So it's come to this. There's a Simpsons episode called So It's Come to This. That is the first clip episode that they did.
So 6 Feet Under was the first and only show that I was in Portland, and I think my best friend and my dad and I happened to watch it together, and we're like, oh my God, this is amazing. So we invited other people and we backtracked. And so we had a group of 5 of us that would show up every Sunday to watch this together. And I think we watched 2 seasons that way. And I would like do 6 Feet Under, and then I would go out and host karaoke. And those were my Sunday evenings.
Oh my God, that sounds awesome. So wait, hold on. My girlfriend has mentioned 6 Feet Under a couple of times, and I honestly don't know. I keep getting it confused with a show called Dead Like Me, and I don't think they have anything to do with each other at all.
No, they don't.
So 6 Feet Under, what is the premise? Like you said, it's this quirky premise. What is the show?
Prodigal Son returns. So Nathaniel, I'm not remembering their last name right now for some reason. So Nate, the eldest son, returns when his father, who was a funeral director, dies suddenly. And their family runs a funeral home in, I think, LA or Santa Monica. So he comes back and they need him to help. He comes back from Seattle and they need him to help run the funeral parlor or whatever for a while. It's supposed to be temporary. And it's that adventure of his return to the career that his brother has followed in the footsteps of his father already. And he ran screaming away from the family business off on some other adventure. So it's sort of this gentleman who's escaped and is sort of worldly and has traveled and kind of he's more of a wandering spirit that comes back to this sort of, I mean, their house is really above the crematorium and where they do the embalming. And then they have like, it's a display space. So it's a funeral home that the family runs. And
I actually knew a friend in college who lived above a mortuary. And when we would go over, I went over to his place a couple times, and we would be like, yeah, there's dead bodies downstairs. And part of the reason he got discounted rent because he was above it, but he was also supposed to like keep out for it because apparently people break into places like that.
Oh, sure.
Like,
sure.
So
chemicals, fluids, interesting things.
Bodies, I guess. So anyway, like it was fun to go over and have parties at his house and be like, like,
One of the things that was really great about that, and we have to remember that Alan Ball is the writer and director of American Beauty, which was also kind of outstanding for being dark and truthful and slow in a particular way.
And quirky. So the American Beauty guy did the whole TV show.
Yeah, they do end up with several other writers and directors, but it was his whole show arc. He knew exactly what he was doing for the 5
wasn't
years.
American Beauty directed by Sam Mendes?
But I think Alan Ball wrote it.
Oh, we wrote it. Okay. Got it.
So yeah, it's quirky and dark and truthful. And I don't think TV was allowing characters to be as fully rounded and thought out, in the sense that most of the television people weren't overtly ugly and complex.
You mean character-wise?
Characters weren't very complicated prior to this show.
Yeah, one note, two-dimensional. Yeah.
Yeah. And characters were a little ugly. I mean, I did grow up watching like the 90s trope, the kind of comedian that's based off of probably what's his douche? Who's the problematic director?
Yeah, he's great.
The problematic director of many, many films, Woody Allen. Thank you, Woody Allen.
I was going to say Roman Polanski.
The humor of the sort of acerbic and self-deprecated, whiny,
socially awkward
guy that, Seinfeld and Mad About You. Like, Mad About You is a nicer version of this same kind of comedy, but there's this trope that the curmudgeon could be kind of an asshole but loved anyway, which was it's a big thing I'm glad we've moved from, but it was a big part of my own personality for a very long time, just thinking that I could just be an asshole and all of my real friends would still love me and stick around. And it turns out that's true-ish, but not a good way to live.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I have others, but I'd love to hear more from your list.
Well, so what was significant about 6 Feet Under for you?
Significant about 6 Feet Under is
other than like it heralded a new kind of storytelling and TV.
It was phenomenally real in dropping into family dysfunction, dropping into people learning how to communicate truthfully, honestly, confront the past that people didn't like talk about. So it's watching this family that was full of secrets and they never talked to each other, have this person that had gone out in the world and had new rules come back and be a catalyst for shaking up and actually talking about their trauma and actually healing and facing each other in a way that was different. And I have there were a lot of secrets and not talking in my version of my dysfunctional family. I think I talked about how talk shows actually talking about the traumas, bringing them out into the world. This was one of those first shows to just be self-reflective and allow themselves to be very dark. There are characters that make a lot of really self-destructive decisions, and then you have to see them pay for it. It's not, I guess there's a character that might be thought of as the manic pixie dream girl setup. And generally in a movie, the manic pixie dream girl shows up and it's entertaining and the hero character gets his like learning from that, but we never really see the fallout for her. What is that? There's all of the movies that are about that. And there are many characters that go through their manic pixie
every movie
moments.
with Zooey Deschanel.
Yes. I was just thinking of the Kate Hudson movie where she's the groupie. That's actually based on someone who's here in Portland and is rad. But yeah, so in this sense, you actually see the behind the scenes. It's weird to say that you see the behind the scenes of the kinds of things you used to see. So like dropping the curtain even on television and the stories that we've told.
So they just keep the story going past the point when it would normally stop.
Right.
Yeah. So it seems like there's one strategy or one type of story that can be really valuable is a more like we're revealing characters in situations that parallel our own. And it's almost like learn from these mistakes, like learn from this example, and not only mistakes, because you're saying like some people are actually voicing their trauma and other people are making mistakes, but more realistic storytelling where you're learning by living through this experience with other people. And it's not the superhero kind of thing, or it's not fantasy where there's metaphor for your own journey. It's more meant to be taken on a kind of literal level. Totally. But it's speaking to like, is your life like this? Or maybe your life isn't quite this bad. Like, have you seen Ozark?
Oh, yeah.
Ozark is one that is like, for me. Like I watch it and I love it. And I'm just like, and it sometimes it feels a little too real almost. There's another show that came to mind called I like horror a lot, but I don't like gore for the sake of gore, and I'm not that big into monster movies. I'm into horror where it's like it's a way to elevate the story and to elevate the excitement and energy of the story, but the story would be good without the horror part of it.
Sure. Okay.
So there's a TV show, Netflix show called The Haunting of Hill House.
I have not heard of that.
And it's a ghost story. Ooh, ghosts. Which I'm not always into. But the way that this is told is that it is a story about this dysfunctional family and how their way of being with each other has trickled down into all these results, and then them sort of coming back together because somebody dies and then having to face this trauma in the past. And I love being able to like take a horror movie and be like, well, what if it wasn't a ghost? What if it was alcoholism?
Right.
Like, what if you took that thing out and you substituted it with this? What if the ghost is a metaphor for something else? Like I remember someone with an interpretation of The Exorcist, which is actually, apparently it's implied more in the book. But there's a few scenes that apparently the director fought pretty hard to make sure they stay in, that you're not quite clear what they're about. But the interpretation of the story is that Reagan, the girl in The Exorcist, was being sexually molested. And that's actually what was going on. And that's what the whole story is about. Obviously, like
makes a lot more sense now.
Spinning the head and the projectile split pea soup, notwithstanding, and levitating beds and all that. So obviously they take it to the next level, but it's this idea that there's actually something real in here. And then the supernatural part is like wrapped around it. Anyway, when you were describing the idea of like this dysfunctional family coming back together and airing their stuff and working through it, it made me think of that Haunting of Hill House. It was good. I liked it.
Well, it's on par with the things I was saying last week about the kinds of indie flicks and movies that have a beautiful way of showing truth of challenges of what life can feel like and drop you in situationally that way. I have other things. We're running up at 3 and I want to check in because we have other stuff to say.
Can I rapid fire a couple of them?
Yeah.
And then I think I can be done with my pre-waking up list finally. So I think some of the earliest movies that I really took and was like early in my life that I watched that I was like, oh, this means something. This is important. Was Schindler's List.
Mm-hmm.
I watched that at a pretty young age. My parents kind of sat me down and we watched it as a family and then discussed it afterwards. Not at the same time as Roots, but in a similar way where it was like, this is important. You need to know about this. And then it prompted a lot of conversation. And that was an important, like, world changing movie, because like to realize like this really happened. And the other one was Saving Private Ryan, which I saw significantly older, and I watched that in the theater. Yeah. And I remember hearing the stories about like vets that would go to and they couldn't sit through the opening scene. They had to leave because it was so real. And then to just like the way that it portrays death and war in this just like awkwardly real kind of way, that it's the opposite of glorifying violence. And that was really significant on a more practical level. The last one is a story. It's Spider-Man 2, like not to change gears too much. So first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie was great. I really enjoyed it. I went and saw it in the theater, and I was super excited for the second one. Right. And I went to a midnight showing. So this happened at about 2:30 in the morning when I was watching the second one. There is a scene, spoilers, it's been around a long time. If you haven't fucking seen it, go watch it. It's great. It still holds up. It's still one of the best. Like Dr. Octopus, and it's Sam Raimi, wonderful. Tobey Maguire looks like he's 35, so like, but other than that, really wonderful movie. Great in all kinds of ways. There is a scene at the end of the movie when he's been trying to win over the girl, right?
Okay.
Throughout the whole Mary Jane. He's been trying to win over Mary Jane throughout the whole movie, and he keeps disappointing her. But he keeps disappointing her because he's Spider-Man, and he can't tell her that he's Spider-Man. And so then she gets kidnapped by Dr. Octopus, and they fight, and then they have this touching moment when Dr. Octopus like rips his mask off, and he's like, but I don't want you to die. And he's like, but I'm going to sacrifice myself. And so Dr. Octopus has this redemption moment at the very end, and like he takes the sun that he was creating down into the water, so the whole city is saved. And then there's kind of this little bit of a down note, and then all of a sudden the camera pans over and you realize that Mary Jane is seeing him without his mask on. And he looks over and sees her, and then like the camera does this like pull zoom and you're just like, no. And then she gets it. She really, in that moment, the implication is like, oh, I understand why. And like all this. And then like this wall starts falling like it's going to crush her. And he goes over and saves her. And it's like this very profound moment. And I remember crying so hard in that moment. And I couldn't stop thinking about it for weeks afterwards. And I realized that moment, that idea that I'm disappointing someone, but you don't know why. You don't know what I'm going through. You don't know the secret that I have of this burden that I'm carrying, and that I wanted to be like, I wanted that moment. I wanted that moment when they would see, oh, I see what's going on. This is an interesting one for me because this does not resonate with me at all anymore. Oh. And it was a profoundly healing, transformative experience in that moment. But as I've grown, I've come to realize that was based on a deep sense of martyrdom in myself. that the reason that resonated with me so much was because of like a fucked up, childish perspective that I had, that I wanted someone, like I didn't want to have to communicate about it. I just wanted it to be revealed to the world it's hard to explain, but it's one of those moments where it was profound when I saw it, and then I grew, and now I'm like, it doesn't touch me the way that it did before, because I don't have those same issues, which I'm glad about. I moved past those things. Yeah,
I have a reflection of that from post-awakening moments of watching Once Upon a Time. In the sense that the story that if only everyone can have that peel back the mask moment that explains why we've done anything that we've done, the idea that we're all doing the best that we can with the resources that we have. And, you know, if you knew that the person who cut you off was trying to get to the hospital, you'd be like, go,
Right.
go, right? I had those moments around my relationship with my mother, having watched over and over again different instances of parents making decisions in the worst of circumstances. In this show, Once Upon a Time, these like fairy tale, and then they were the people who were theoretically evil or villains, you know, making choices that affected their children, and realizing, because this was one of those shows that peels back the curtain and, or you know, tears off the mask and reveals who these people were and the situations and circumstances they were under. And that you know, they had their hearts broken and they were hurt in particular ways and didn't have other choices or resources, and they were making the best decisions that they could at the time. I had one of those shivering moments of recognizing that some story that I had told myself a very long time ago that equaled that my mother didn't love me. Watching this show, I had this shivering, crying, sobbing moment of recognizing the thing she'd been saying my whole life, that she did the best she could because that's her speech she tells. I actually had a visceral sense of like, she really did. She really did do the best that she could. And in moments where I had thought of that as an excuse that she would make, because sometimes she would say it as though it was an excuse she was making, but having that like shivering sensation of recognizing like, oh, I see it now. I get it. Much like Mary Jane in the corner. Oh, he's fucking Spider-Man. Well, that makes sense.
Right. Well, and there's an interesting point there that I think a lot of times, to get very specific in your situation, a lot of times when someone's saying, I'm doing the best that I can, and we can't hear it, it's often because they don't actually believe it.
Yep.
They are, because we all are doing the best we can. But when we have a voice inside of our head that says you're not doing the best you can, even when you try to say it to someone else, the other person will pick up on the incongruity, that voice inside yourself. And then you're like, well, no, she's not. And then for you to transcend that and go, oh, I'm not going to take that on. I'm going to see she really is, even though she doesn't think she is. She really is.
And more specifically in this moment, if we're talking about the kinds of results that you can have, and what do we mean by you can have a breakthrough or a transcending moment? I'm saying that I had a story and a belief from my past, of even a story that my mother repeated to me of choices that she made when I was really little. And that story always equaled either that she didn't love me or that was a neglectful thing that she did.
Yeah.
And in this moment of watching these few episodes of television shows, I think it all happened in the first or second season of watching Once Upon a Time, I suddenly, that literally all of the same memories and stories that she had told me about me when I was little suddenly equaled the thing that she did. The choices she made were the most loving thing she could possibly do. The thing that used to equal not love and also neglect was that thing she did is love. That equals love. My mother absolutely does love me. And that's the proof. I'm talking about like, you can flip a switch instantaneously.
Yes.
On a story you've been telling and a belief you've been holding, and it can just be done.
Yeah.
It can be completely gone. And
one of the things that can lead you to that is a TV show or a movie.
Yeah.
So that's a good place to wrap up.
I think so. We've got other stories we could tell, but I think
it's time. I think next time we talk about post waking up.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love it.
Okay. Fabulous.
All right. Insert
I'll see you next week.
Tag phrase, whatever here.
Eventually, we're going to have some way to sign off here. But for right now, love you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks for being here. Bye.